Petfinder is not a scam. Petfinder is just a tool that is being misused. Just like anything, right? You put it out there into the universe and people will find ways to mess with your product and mess with the system. And that's what's happening. And unfortunately, for ease of use for rescues and shelters, they can't really change that it's being misused. So really, it's up to us to make sure we're informed. Welcome to episode 6 of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Muir, and this is the place you need to be if you're looking to get a dog or you have a rescue dog. This is where you want to be, that one-stop shop to get all the knowledge and advice for adopting and integrating the rescue dog of your dreams. So let's get right into it. I'm glad to have you here. Today we're talking about Petfinder. If you haven't heard of Petfinder, it's basically a search engine for adoptable pets in North America. And the reason we're talking about it today is because it's become a very popular question or search word amongst people who are Googling right now. So I've noticed that my website's getting lots of hits regarding, is Petfinder a scam? And I did a blog about this a little while back, and I thought it should get resurfaced again because clearly people are having issues adopting and are nervous about the people they're dealing with on Petfinder. So I want to make sure you're prepared to use this tool because how could you not? It's such a great thing for rescues and dog adopters, but use it smartly. So I'm going to talk to you about how to use Petfinder today and how to avoid Petfinder scams. So many rescues and shelters will regularly upload their available dog or cat or pet profiles onto Petfinder, as well as their own Facebook page or website. So Petfinder just kind of acts as this database for all of these adoptable pets, which is great because then you can kind of consolidate your search a bit and you don't have to go website by website or Facebook page by Facebook page to find animals that are available in your area. Then Petfinder categorizes these pets so that you can easily do a specific search regarding breed, age, size, gender, and find something compatible for you. I myself have used this tool to find my own rescue pets and to assist my clients in their search. And I'll say it's not all encompassing, but it does have a good majority of the adoptable dogs available on it. You can find dogs through search engines like Pet Tango or Adopt a Pet. Even PetSmart Charities has a search engine page for adoptable pets. So some rescues or shelters will use other means and other search engines, but also just their websites or just their Facebook page. So it really depends, but for the most part, it does do a broad range of pets across North America. And for me, I'm specifically talking about Ontario rescue dogs, and it seems to be fantastic and really popular for our region in particular. So for my clients, would also use a spreadsheet which had 50 plus rescues that were local to Waterloo region. And that was a good means of being able to go through each website or social media page where they would put their pets up and have more details on the rescue, like what they tend to specialize in, whether they tend to specialize in international rescues or northern rescue dogs or local surrenders, that sort of thing. So I found that spreadsheet that I use really helpful. And actually in my Pawdoption Guide membership experience, which is launching in 2022, that's one of the resources that will be available to members, is to be able to search using my spreadsheet that I would use on top of Petfinder to just aid in getting that competitive edge and being right on it as these rescues are posting new dogs, and have the extra bit of information about the rescues as well that I have there. So certainly Petfinder is not the only tool, but it is a great tool to be used to find an adoptable dog. So let's start with some basic tips on how to use Petfinder. It is pretty user-friendly, but one would be to start specific. So they have filters, just like if you were to go furniture shopping on a website, you can kind of filter things down by color or size or brand. Well, you can do that with your search for your dog. So you can go with things like their age, breed, their sex, their compatibility with animals like dogs, cats, or whether they're good with kids. You can narrow those things down, as well as then put in your location, which is going to give you a certain radius that you determine for dogs that are compatible with you. So once you press search, then it's really going to narrow that down. And depending on how specific you get or how narrow you make that, you might get very few results. But that's how I recommend you start, because we really want to go for the best. And if rescues are paying attention to what they're posting, then you should be able to find unique match by narrowing it down. However, if you're not finding the matches you need, or you're really not getting any results back, then you need to start scaling it back from there. But I always recommend reach for the stars and start with real specific, and then pull it back a little bit. So even, for instance, some rescues may post that dogs aren't good with kids because in general they don't adopt out dogs to families with kids under the age of 8. Well, that might be something that is negotiable for you, right? Like you don't have kids that live in the home, but your grandkids are older. So, really it doesn't have to be good with kids that are under 7, right? Like if that's what a rescue is going to say, well, we don't adopt out to those homes. Well, technically that doesn't meet your needs anyways. So that's where, just adjusting those things may help you find some dogs that would fall in between the cracks otherwise. Another tip would be to use the desktop version. So go to petfinder.com and use that web browser version. I have used the app many times, and it's never as good as the web browser. So the web browser really allows you to use all those filters, and I found the app doesn't allow you to do so, or I have found that if I've ever tried that, it's just doesn't seem to be doing so. So it's not, the app for your phone is really just not as ideal. And if you really want to get a quality search in, just use your laptop or your computer for that need, because it's just a million times faster. Even loading all the profiles at once, I found that the app was often very slow. Didn't really matter what phone I was using, that it just take a lot of time to load all those profiles, and you can swipe through so much faster when you're using a computer. So that would be a huge tip for people who try to use it on their phone. You're not getting the full benefit of Petfinder, so head on over to your laptop or your computer. Another tip is adjust your location as needed. So when I was recently searching for someone in the Windsor area, Windsor, Ontario is right along the border of the US, and there is no way to filter out countries. So if you just want to look in Canada, I have not seen that there's an ability on Petfinder to do so. But if your proximity of where you're searching happens to be closer to the US, then you're likely to get US matches. And especially in COVID times, that's not an easy ordeal to get a dog from the States. You're much better try adopt within your own country. So I usually recommend that, especially for first-time pet adopters. Just stay local, stay within Canada in terms of your search. And a way to get around that if you live near the border is to just change your location to be something a little less close to the border. So if I'm looking for Windsor, I went to London instead to search. And, then you're at least just delaying how soon you get those U.S. matches. So I would just suggest that you don't think of it like, it has to be where I am literally located or where I live that I'm searching from. Know that you're going to get a radius around you. And so feel free to just edge out of that radius a little bit, and that might adjust the results you're getting as well. And if you live in a rural area, choose a location that is more urban, but obviously like your next closest city in order to start your search from there on Petfinder, because again, you're more likely to find matches and results increased when you choose a better location. So that's another tip. Lastly, avoid out-of-country dogs. I will get much more in depth about that towards the end of this podcast, but just for now, that's another basic tip. I think they are often called out-of-country or out-of-town dogs, and they'll have a little flag on their profile picture saying so, and I believe there is now a filter where you can sometimes select that you don't want to see those. So I suggest just skipping right past those for the most part, and we'll get more into that later. So while Petfinder has made pet adoption much more accessible, this is a double-edged sword, because it's good as it shows pet adopters a wider range of adoptable animals, and it really increases your likelihood of finding a good match. But it's bad because it's made it really easy for everyone and anyone to upload adoptable pet profiles. So unfortunately, that means that scammers and less than reputable rescues are making use of this resource. So what do I mean when I say less than reputable rescues? These are organizations that are focused on profit rather than an animal's well-being. So they are just trying to get these animals turned over into homes as fast as possible in order to gain a profit. And they're often cutting corners with their care, whether that's by not having them fully vaccinated, not taking them to a vet to have them looked over, also not maybe doing proper deworming or even neutering or spaying them. If you're getting a pet that's either not spayed or not neutered from a rescue, then there better be a incentive or demand that you spay or neuter that pet within a certain period of time of getting it, or you're probably dealing with a shady rescue, because that is one of the main things that rescues and shelters are out there to do. They're trying to increase responsible pet ownership and decrease homeless pets. So what's a great way to do that? By spaying and neutering pets so that we can't have more unwanted litters, and they have to do less work in general because animals are finding their forever homes. So that's one thing you can certainly look for when you're trying to decipher whether a rescue is a quality rescue or not. And then another thing that these less than reputable rescues are doing is providing false information, such as the source. Where is this dog coming from? The breed, maybe falsifying what breed it is because, hey, maybe it's a pit bull and those are currently illegal in Ontario, so they want to adopt it out, but they're just going to call it a boxer mix or something. Well, that's, again, not being forthright, and although I don't have anything against pit bulls, they are illegal in Ontario right now, so I'd hate anyone to get set up with a pit bull unknowingly and having that, backfire on them because someone reports their pit bull-like dog. And then other things like they're misreporting ages, saying that the dog is way younger than it is, or not sharing appropriate information about their behavior, or actually giving false information about their behavior. So saying they are really a quiet dog, but then they actually bark a lot, or they're good with dogs, but they're actually dog aggressive. So those are certainly concerns that are real. And I'll just say right now, there's been a lot of information that have come out about Redemption Paws, and that's kind of a Toronto rescue. And it's a huge rescue, and they often have tons of dogs available because of their large dog transfer operations that go on. But we have been finding out that they are a less than reputable rescue, and they are really serving to gain a profit, and that's certainly not something we want to support. So I highly recommend, if you follow Redemption Paws, to unfollow them. And I think there's an Instagram account called redemption_flaws, and it talks about a lot of the information that's been coming from Redemption Paws and the whistleblowing that's been happening, and all the volunteers who have been sharing information about their shady practices. So get educated. This is why I'm here, trying to make sure we can make this a less complicated process for pet adopters. So let's get smart with Petfinder, and I want you to consider these 4 questions every time you use Petfinder. Every time you find an adoptable pet, you shouldn't just be focused solely on that pet profile and think, oh, found the perfect match. I love this profile, done deal. You need to also look at the rescue behind that pet, rescue behind that dog, and then ask these questions. So, number 1, does the rescue or shelter have a quality website or a long-standing Facebook page with an active following? I have looked up many rescue dog lately that has been under a very short-term Facebook page. The rescue literally just started, and they're posting things that aren't very professional, let's just say, and it seems like it may be only one person who's posting them. They have a very small following. This is a red flag to me, and I would be highly cautious about trying to get a dog from that sort of situation. So an established rescue organization should really have like an online home that looks professional and is easy to use and navigate. And if they only have a Facebook page, you should really peruse some of their posts, see what kind of pets they've had available, and scroll down to the page transparency column that's on the left of the page. And you should check when they started that Facebook page. So if they regularly have puppies available, you should be assessing why is that, because that's not very common for rescues. They would usually get a litter here and there, like maybe a few a year, if that. And there wouldn't be that constant access to puppies. That would be a red flag if they seem to have litter after litter after litter. Where are these dogs coming from? Are they coming from a puppy broker? Is this a puppy broker, which is a seller of puppy mill puppies? Or is this a rescue that basically helps the puppy mills out by, getting rid of their inventory that's not selling? Well, that is still technically supporting a puppy mill because they're still probably turning some sort of profit from there. So you should be questioning that. And maybe it's really not a rescue at all. So if they just have a Petfinder profile or a Facebook page that has a poor following or not much interest or not many posts or questionable posts, then I'd be looking elsewhere. Number 2, is the rescue or shelter a registered charity or have a not-for-profit status? This is kind of just one extra thing that shows that the rescue has taken some professional steps for their organization, and it provides a sense of permanence and adds some legitimacy to their organization. So it's not the end-all be-all. I've certainly seen many a rescue that doesn't have those statements on their website or on their Facebook page. or anywhere you can find their information. But often the rescues that have the best reputations have that information. So that's enough said there. Number 3, what is the rescue or shelter's process? Most rescues and shelters follow this general format for adoption. 1, you have to fill out an application in order to find out more about that dog that you're applying for. 2, then they do a phone or video interview. 3, there's a reference check and home check. The home check is like a home tour, and that may or may not occur during a meet and greet. And so there's numerous ways that can occur, but it occurs. 4, there would be possibly a follow-up foster call if the dog is in foster care, or a rescue interview on top of your last interview that shares more details about the adoptable pets. So there certainly should be this order of events. And then following that interview process, then there's a meet and greet. And that may happen at a location like the foster's home or a location around the rescue, so wherever that rescue operates out of. But it could also happen near you just based on volunteers and foster parents and where they're located. And then lastly, a contractual agreement. So there should be a contract that is going to solidify this transfer of ownership from the rescue to you. And it should look pretty legitimate and have some clauses about what would you do if the pet was going to have to be given up again. You need to say that you're going to contact the rescue in order to return the dog to them or whatever. There should be a good contract that looks pretty professional coming from this rescue at the end of that process before the dog can change hands. And another thing I should mention is that cost or a fee for an adoptable dog is usually under $1,000. So if you're getting a dog from a rescue or shelter, they're not usually charging you over $1,000 for this dog. So that's another way to just spot some shady business or someone who's trying to exploit you, is by a high fee, because rescues and shelters should not be operating to turn a profit. They're operating to cover their expenses and just be able to continue operating and providing more support. They get their additional needs met by donations and fundraising events and so on. So if the process doesn't really follow that general format and it's as simple as just inquiring and sending them a message and they're like, yep, dog's yours, and they really haven't checked you out or your references, or even if you're just sending in an application, really that is not enough to qualify as a quality assessment of you as a pet owner. And again, that's what rescues and shelters are doing. They're trying to make sure you're going to be a forever home for this pet. So if they're not doing that process, that due diligence, then they are not a reputable rescue or shelter. So run for the hills. Number 4, is the animal currently in your country? So this is what I was speaking about earlier when I was talking about how to use Petfinder and just, in general, not looking at out of town or out of country pets. Lots of these pets are posted on Petfinder, and many of them require adoption and payment sight unseen. So they're not a foster to adopt policy agreement, which can be common. There's lots of rescues that are doing foster to adopt FTAs, but this is not the scenario we're seeing. Like the out of country dogs, there are many of them that are just requiring you're adopting this dog. It doesn't say anything about a trial period or anything that's set in stone in terms of like a policy to return that dog if things don't work out. It's just, this dog's from Greece and we want you to adopt it because it looks cute and it has a great picture here and we say it's great, and we just expect you to blindly agree with that and take the dog off our hands. That is really unlikely that is a quality rescue or shelter. So highly recommend not engaging in that type of adoption. There are other ways to adopt a pet, and certainly you might be looking a little longer, but it's worth it to not have the headache of all the questionable things that could come up following that. I've even heard about out-of-town pets being posted as certain genders, and then the person actually receives the dog and they're a whole different gender. It's like, how did you get that wrong? So don't get yourself into that situation. All in all, a friendly reminder for you is that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. I really hope this has been helpful. I've had a few people tell me about some unfortunate experiences with Petfinder scams or some illegitimate rescues lately, and I just want to save others from facing those sorts of hardships because pet adoption is supposed to be accessible. That is exactly what Petfinder is about, and Petfinder is not a scam. Petfinder is just a tool that is being misused. Just like anything, right? You put it out there into the universe and people will find ways to mess with your product and mess with the system, and that's what's happening. And unfortunately, for ease of use for rescues and shelters, they can't really change that it's being misused. So really, it's up to us to make sure we're informed when we're searching through Petfinder and that we're using this sort of process to make sure we're dealing with legitimate rescues and shelters as we're searching. Of course, you can't start your search unless you've narrowed down what you're looking for. I urge you to grab my free Are You Ready to Get a Dog checklist today. You can find the link in my show notes or at pawdoptionguide.com/helpful tools. The Are You Ready to Get a Dog checklist is really going to help you decipher all your needs in terms of what you want, in terms of your budgeting, your financial status for getting a dog, as well as some preparation in order to be able to fill out the first application when you find a good match. So it really is that prep work to make sure that you're fully ready to start your dog search. Get that checklist on my website today. So let's quickly summarize the basic tips on how to use Petfinder. 1, be specific. Get narrow with your filters, and then pull those filters back as needed if you haven't gotten a lot of results. Then use the desktop version. Quit trying to use that mobile app. It is doing you no good, and it's a really inefficient way to search through Petfinder. So just use the desktop version, and you'll be much happier for it. Next, adjust your location as needed so that you can get some quality matches. So don't feel like you just have to use where you live to locate a dog. Find your nearest urban location, use that as a setting, or if you need to set something so you're not going to get the out of town or out of country dogs, just find a location further away from those dogs in order to do so. And then lastly, avoid the out of country dogs. So those are how to use Petfinder tips. And then these are the 4 questions you need to use when you use Petfinder. 1, does the rescuer shelter have a quality website or a long-standing Facebook page with an active following? 2, is the rescuer shelter a registered charity or have not-for-profit status? 3, what is the rescue or shelter's process, and does it seem legitimate? 4, is the animal currently in your country? I highly recommend you just stay away from out-of-town pets, but if you just can't help yourself, then make sure there's a foster to adopt agreement in place and that you're dealing with a quality rescue. So always check the background of that rescue. I hope today's episode was eye-opening for you. I know that I use Petfinder so much, but a lot of people just use it once when they're looking for that dog. And so there might be a lot of things that I just think are obvious to me about this tool. But if you have any further questions about Petfinder or have an interesting scenario to share with me, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me on Instagram at Pawdoption Guide or Facebook at Pawdoption Guide. I really appreciate you listening. Please leave me a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And always feel free to reach out. I love to hear from you guys, and I love your feedback on this podcast. It's really feeling like a great way of connecting with all of you while you're in your dog adoption journey. So thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to be here with you again next week.